Oh, what do you see when you look in the mirror? Leah saw cracks, flaws, a reflection that told her she wasn't enough, until she met a carpenter who saw her differently. And through their story, she discovered that even broken mirrors can still reflect the light. Leah pressed her palms against the cool leather of her portfolio, her heart thudding in her chest. She'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. Late nights painting, second-guessing, repainting. Now she stood in the hallway of the gallery, waiting for someone to glance at her work and see her. Her name had been called, briefly, and she'd walked forward with shaky hands, setting her canvases on the table. The curator, a woman in sharp heels and sharper words, barely looked up as Leah explained her pieces. The woman murmured, her voice polite but clipped. Your technique is fine, but it's not very striking, not memorable. Leah felt heat rise to her cheeks. I was trying to capture light in broken places. How imperfections can still— Yes, yes, the woman interrupted, waving a manicured hand. We see a lot of that. Honestly, it's all starting to blur together. And just like that, Leah was dismissed. She stepped outside into the cool air, clutching her portfolio to her chest. The sounds of the city swirled around her. Cars honking, people laughing, the chatter of a group leaving the gallery. She tried to breathe, but their words clung to her ears. Not memorable, not striking, like a verdict. As she rounded the corner, she heard two voices behind her. I don't get why she even submitted, one whispered. Her work looks like a high school project. Their laughter followed her down the street. Her vision blurred, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy, every step an echo of shame. Back at her small apartment, Leah dropped her portfolio by the door and sank onto the couch. Her studio corner sat in silence. Easel, paints, half-finished sketches. The cracked mirror on the wall caught her reflection. She hated that mirror. It had broken months ago when she'd dropped it moving furniture, but she hadn't replaced it. A thin crack ran across her face whenever she stood before it, splitting her image in two. Tonight, the crack felt honest. More honest than her art. She touched the glass, tracing the broken line. You're not enough, she whispered to herself. Not beautiful, not talented, not anything. The words slipped out like they'd been waiting, crouched in the shadows of her mind. She sank to her knees, pressing her forehead to her folded arms. God, why does it always feel like I'm failing? Why do I never measure up? If you see me differently, why can't I see it too? Her prayer was quiet, desperate, but the silence that followed felt heavy. Leah closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She thought she'd moved past this, thought she'd outgrown the old lies. But here they were again, loud as ever, louder than truth. And in the flickering light of her studio lamp, the broken mirror stared back at her, reflecting not just her face, but the cracks she carried inside. The next morning, Leah tried to lose herself in routine. She brewed coffee, flipped through her sketchbook, and stared at the half-finished paintings that seemed to mock her. But inspiration wouldn't come. Her chest still ached from the gallery rejection, the words replaying like a cruel refrain. Not memorable, not striking. By mid-afternoon, she needed air. She grabbed her sketchbook and charcoal pencils and walked through the quiet streets until the old stone church came into view. It had always been her refuge. She wasn't particularly religious as a child, but she loved the stained glass windows, how sunlight poured through colored glass, and painted the floor in shimmering fragments. It reminded her that broken pieces could still make beauty. Inside, the church was hushed, only the faint creak of wood and the smell of dust and polish filling the air. Leah settled into a pew near the front, sketchbook in her lap, her eyes lifting to the window of the Good Shepherd. She began to draw the lines of his outstretched hands, the folds of his robe, the gentle strength in his eyes. Her pencil moved slowly, almost reverently. Then came the sound, a sharp scrape, followed by the dull thud of wood. Leah jumped. She turned and saw him, a man bent over one of the pews, sanding it down. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, sawdust clinging to his shirt. His hands were steady, strong, moving with practiced care. He looked up when he felt her eyes. "Sorry," he said quickly, brushing his hands. "Didn't mean to interrupt." Leah shook her head, embarrassed. "No, I was just sketching." "You startled me." He gave a half smile, warm but reserved. "You an artist?" Leah's fingers tightened on her sketchbook. Sort of. Sort of." He chuckled softly. "I thought that's the kind of thing you either are or aren't." Leah bit her lip. "I don't know anymore." Something in her tone must have caught his attention. He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the book in her hands. "Mind if I see?" Her instinct screamed no. No one ever looked unless it was perfect. But something about his expression, curious, not critical, made her pause. Hesitantly, she opened to the page she'd been working on, the Good Shepherd in soft charcoal lines. He leaned closer, his eyes lighting with appreciation. "That's beautiful." Leah felt her cheeks warm. "It's nothing, just practice. Doesn't look like nothing to me." His words lingered longer than she expected, cutting through the heaviness that had clung to her since the gallery. She cleared her throat. "And you?" "What are you doing here?" He tapped the sanded wood. "Restoring the pews. Old church like this deserves some care. I work with wood, furniture, repairs, whatever needs hands." Leah traced the lines of her sketch absent-mindedly. "Restoring. That sounds patient." He smiled faintly. "Wood takes time, and it doesn't always cooperate, but I like it. Imperfections aren't flaws. They're character. You just need to know how to bring the beauty out." Leah glanced at him, startled by how closely his words touched the ache in her chest. He noticed, but didn't press. Instead, he wiped his hands on a rag and extended one toward her. "I'm Caleb." She hesitated, then slipped her hand into his. His grip was firm, warm, grounding. "Leah," she murmured. "Nice to meet you, Leah," he said, his smile small but genuine. And for the first time in a long time, Leah felt a flicker of something unexpected. Not confidence, not certainty, but the faintest spark of hope. Leah sat on her bed with her knees drawn to her chest, staring at the cracked mirror across the room. The crack ran diagonally, slicing through her reflection like a wound. Her face, her whole self, looked divided, distorted. Her best friend, Julia, sprawled across the other end of the bed, scrolling through her phone. "You're too hard on yourself," Julia said without looking up. "I've seen your work, Leah." "It's beautiful. Don't let one rejection convince you otherwise." Leah gave a humorless laugh. "You didn't hear how she said it. Like I wasn't even worth the time it took to critique me. And maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not enough." Julia finally looked up, her eyes soft but firm. "You've always been enough. You just don't believe it." Leah turned her gaze back to the mirror. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know how to." Later that evening, Caleb's words replayed in her mind. Imperfections aren't flaws. They're character. You just need to know how to bring the beauty out. She almost scoffed. Easy for him to say. Wood didn't have scars that mocked it every time it looked in the mirror. Still, something about the way he'd said it lingered. Not as criticism, not as flattery, just truth. At the same time, across town, Caleb swept sawdust from the floor of his workshop. The scent of cedar and varnish filled the air. He paused over a half-finished piece, an old chair with deep cracks running through its frame. Most people would have thrown it away, but Caleb saw possibility. He traced the cracks with his hand, imagining the way glue, clamps, and polish would bring it back to life. Not perfect, not new, but restored. Beautiful because of its scars, not in spite of them. He smiled faintly, remembering Leah's hesitant eyes when she showed him her sketch. How she'd brushed it off as just practice. He'd seen the opposite, raw talent, waiting to be nurtured. Back in her apartment, Leah forced herself to pick up a pencil. She opened her sketchbook, trying to lose herself in lines and shading. But her thoughts kept circling back to the gallery, the laughter she'd overheard, the cracked mirror watching from the corner. Her hand trembled, and the pencil streaked too dark across the page. Frustrated, she snapped the sketchbook shut. Her eyes burned with tears. "Why can't I just believe I'm worth anything?" she whispered. She stood, moving to the mirror again. Her reflection stared back, fractured. "God," she murmured, voice breaking. "If I'm really your masterpiece, why do I only see broken pieces?" Her question hung heavy in the silence. Meanwhile, Caleb lit a lamp in his workshop and leaned over the chair, smoothing the sandpaper across its surface. The wood shone faintly in the glow, scars still visible but softened. He thought of something his grandmother used to say, "Restoration is holy work." You're not erasing the past, you're redeeming it. As his hands moved across the chair, steady and patient, he found himself praying under his breath. "God, if that girl doesn't see the beauty in herself, maybe you'll let me help her, even just a little, two souls in different places. One staring at a broken reflection, one sanding a broken chair. And somewhere between the cracks and the scars, a story of restoration was quietly beginning." The church was quieter than usual that afternoon. Dust motes drifted in the beams of colored light, stained glass painting the floor in shades of red and blue. Leah slipped inside with her sketchbook, drawn to the windows again. Her pencil traced the outlines of the glass, but her heart wasn't in it. She sighed, closing the book. "You always give up that fast?" The voice startled her. She looked up to see Caleb leaning against a pew, rag slung over his shoulder. His hands were rough with sawdust, but his smile was easy. Leah shook her head, embarrassed. "I don't usually have an audience when I quit." He raised a brow. "So, you do this often?" She hesitated. "More often than I'd like to admit." Caleb came closer, glancing at the sketchbook. "You ever wonder why broken things matter to me?" Leah blinked. "I figured you just liked wood." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, I like stories. Every knot, every scar in the wood tells one. You sand too much, you erase it. But if you treat it right, you bring out its character." Leah hugged the book to her chest. "That sounds nice. But wood isn't people. People break and stay broken." Caleb's smile faded. He studied her quietly. "You believe that?" Leah swallowed hard. "Yes, I've seen it. In myself. In my work. It feels like no matter what I do, I'll never measure up. To galleries, to people, to even God sometimes. Her voice cracked on the last word. She quickly looked away. Caleb lowered himself onto the pew across from her. His tone was gentle, steady. Do you know what Ephesians 2:10 says? Leah shook her head. He recited softly, For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Leah blinked at him, uncertain. Workmanship? Masterpiece, he clarified. That's another translation. Not junk, not scraps. Masterpiece. Even when you don't see it, Leah bit her lip, her eyes stinging. That's hard to believe. I look in the mirror and all I see are flaws. Caleb leaned forward, his voice low. Mirrors lie, Leah. They only show the surface. But God! He looks at the whole story, cracks and all. She laughed bitterly, though her throat ached. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who just got told your art is forgettable. Caleb's expression softened. You think your worth depends on what other people say about your work. Her silence was answer enough. He continued carefully. I restore chairs no one else wants. Tables too scarred to use. I bring them back, not because they're valuable to the world, but because I see value in them. Doesn't matter what the auctioneer says, it matters what the craftsman sees. Leah blinked, his words hitting deeper than she wanted to admit. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Caleb rose, brushing his hands. You don't have to believe me today. But just don't give up yet, Leah. The cracks don't make you worthless. Sometimes they make you shine. Leah sat frozen, her heart tangled with doubt and something softer she couldn't name. For years, the mirror had been her measure. But here was this carpenter speaking like he saw something else. Something she didn't. And for the first time, she wondered if maybe he was right. The cafe was loud with weekend chatter. Clinking cups, steaming milk, laughter spilling over the tables. Leah stood frozen in line, her chest tight, her pulse quickening. At the corner table, her ex-boyfriend leaned back in his chair, smiling at the woman beside him. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect laugh. They looked like they belonged on the cover of some glossy magazine. Leah's stomach twisted. She tugged her scarf higher, hoping he wouldn't notice her. But it wasn't just about him. It was about her reflection in the glass window beside them. Pale, tired, hair in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. Her chest ached with a familiar refrain. Not enough, not beautiful, not memorable. She turned and left before her order was called. The cold air outside hit her like a slap. She walked fast, head down, her breath catching. By the time she reached the church steps, her legs were trembling. She slipped inside, the familiar hush wrapping around her. But it didn't calm the storm inside. She sank into a pew and buried her face in her hands. Tears came hot and uninvited. God, she whispered, her voice raw. Why do I always feel like I'll never measure up? Why do I always feel less? The door creaked. Leah stiffened, quickly wiping her eyes. Leah! She looked up. Caleb stood near the back, his hands dusty, his shirt flecked with sawdust. He frowned gently, his voice soft. What happened? Leah shook her head. Nothing. I'm fine. But the crack in her voice betrayed her. He came closer, not sitting beside her, but across the aisle, giving her space. You don't look fine. Leah laughed bitterly, though it sounded more like a sob. I saw him. My ex. With someone new. She was perfect. And her words broke. She pressed her hands to her face. I'll never be that. I'll never be enough. For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was gentle, like he was making room for her pain. Finally, his voice came, low and steady. Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you? Leah sniffed, shaking her head. I thought, here's someone who hides her art like it doesn't matter. But it does, because it reflects light. Leah's throat tightened. I don't feel like light. I feel broken, cracked, like that mirror in my apartment. It doesn't lie. It shows me exactly who I am. Caleb leaned forward, his eyes steady. Even broken mirrors reflect light, Leah. They don't stop being mirrors just because of the cracks. And you don't stop being who God made you just because you can't see what He sees. Her breath caught. His words landed deep, hitting a place she didn't want to admit existed. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Then why does it hurt so much? Caleb's expression softened. Because healing always hurts before it feels whole. Scars don't form without pain, but they don't erase your worth. They prove it. Leah sat there trembling, her heart raw. She wanted to argue, to push his words away, but part of her, the part that had been crying out in prayers she wasn't sure God heard, wanted to believe him. She didn't speak, but she didn't leave either, and Caleb didn't press. He just stayed, quiet, steady, like a craftsman waiting for the glue to set. Caleb's workshop smelled of cedar and varnish, the air thick with sawdust and sunlight filtering through high windows. Leah hesitated in the doorway, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. Come on in, Caleb said, waving her closer. Don't worry, nothing bites. Except maybe the sandpaper. Leah smiled faintly, stepping inside. The room was cluttered but orderly. Tools hung neatly on the walls, piles of wood stacked in the corners, and half-finished furniture sat like patient projects waiting their turn. What do you see? Caleb asked, pointing to a battered table near the workbench. Leah tilted her head. It's cracked. Scratched? Like it's ready for the dumpster, Caleb grinned. Exactly what I thought when I found it. But look closer. He ran his hand along the grain, tracing the scars. These marks? They tell a story. This table has lived through dinners, arguments, laughter. Families sat around it. It's carried life. And now it carries scars. Leah frowned. Scars don't make it beautiful. Caleb looked at her, his eyes steady. No, but scars don't erase beauty either. They can make it deeper, stronger. He picked up a small jar of glue and a clamp. Restoration doesn't mean pretending the damage never happened. It means working with it, honoring it, making it part of the story. Leah crossed her arms, her throat tight. And you think that's supposed to apply to me? Caleb didn't flinch. I don't think. I know. Leah shook her head, her voice sharp. You don't know what it's like to hate what you see in the mirror. To feel like no matter what you do, it's never enough. Caleb's voice softened. You're right. I don't know all of it, but I do know this. Even broken mirrors still reflect light. And if God calls you His masterpiece, then no crack in the glass can change that. Leah's eyes burned. She turned away, staring at the table. Her reflection, fractured, flawed, felt so different from the way Caleb spoke. Why would God even care? She whispered. I'm nothing special. Caleb set down the clamp, stepping closer, but not too close. Because He made you. That's enough. You don't have to perform for Him. You don't have to be striking or memorable. You just have to be you. That's the whole point of grace. Leah's chest ached, tears slipping free. She brushed them away, embarrassed. Caleb didn't look away. Leah, what you see is broken, he sees as beautiful. Restoration doesn't erase scars, it makes them shine. The workshop fell quiet, except for the soft hum of a fan and the distant song of a bird outside. Leah's gaze dropped to the table, to its lines and cracks, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, her brokenness wasn't the end of her story. Leah sat at her easel, the cracked mirror looming just across the room. For weeks she'd avoided it, but tonight she didn't look away. Her pencil hovered above the canvas. Her heart pounded, and slowly, carefully, she began to draw. Not the flawless faces she used to chase, not the polished images she thought galleries wanted. This time she drew the brokenness, lines jagged, pieces fractured, like shards of glass. But when she stepped back, something surprised her. It wasn't ugly. It was real. Her hands moved faster, brushes replacing pencils, colors bleeding across the canvas. Gold streaks, deep blues, cracks turned into pathways for light. The painting took shape, not perfection, but wholeness made from brokenness. Days later, she carried the finished piece into a small community art show at the library. Her chest tightened as she set it on the easel, people wandering past with polite nods. She braced for criticism, for laughter, for indifference. But instead, something different happened. A woman in her 50s stopped and stared. Her eyes softened. She whispered, "That looks like me." A teenager pointed at the fractured light in the painting. "That's how my anxiety feels." But the light, it gives me hope. Leah's throat tightened. She hadn't expected this. Her brokenness, painted, was connecting with people. Caleb arrived halfway through the show, wiping dust from his hands, still smelling faintly of cedar. He stopped in front of her painting and smiled, slow and genuine. "You did it," he said. Leah bit her lip, uncertain. "It's not perfect." "Exactly," he replied. "That's why it's powerful." She shook her head, fighting tears. "I almost gave up." Caleb looked at her, steady and sure. "But you didn't. You chose to shine through the cracks. That's what makes it art. That's what makes it you." The crowd shifted around them, voices murmuring, footsteps echoing. But Leah barely noticed. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking for approval. She was watching people connect with her work, not despite its imperfections, but because of them. Her chest loosened, her breathing steadier than it had been in months. The cracked mirror still existed. Her scars still existed. But maybe they weren't the enemy. Maybe they were the story. The art show was over, the lights dimming as people trickled out. Leah gathered her supplies, still dazed by the comments, the connections, the unexpected warmth. She'd never imagined her brokenness could mean something to anyone else. And yet, tonight, it had. Caleb carried the painting carefully toward the door. "You want me to take this back to your place?" he asked. Leah hesitated, her hand brushing the frame. For the first time, she wasn't ashamed to claim it. "Yes," she said softly. "Please." Outside, the night was calm, the air cool against their skin. They walked side by side, the painting tucked safely under Caleb's arm. The cracked mirror at home waited for her, but somehow she no longer dreaded it. Caleb broke the silence first. "You know, you've always seen more than what you see in that mirror." Leah laughed quietly, though her eyes stung. "You say that like it's easy to believe." He glanced at her, steady and kind. "It isn't easy. But that doesn't make it less true. You're not defined by what's cracked. You're defined by the light that shines through the cracks." Leah swallowed hard, blinking back tears. She wanted to argue, to deflect, but for once, she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you for seeing what I couldn't." They reached her building, the street lamp casting a soft glow over the sidewalk. Caleb set the painting gently against the wall, then turned to her. "You'll forget sometimes," he said. "You'll look in the mirror and hear the old lies. But remember this. Mirrors show reflections, not truths. Truth is what God says about you, and He calls you His masterpiece." Leah's chest ached, but in a new way, not with shame, but with something like hope. She smiled, small but real. "Masterpiece," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Exactly," Caleb said, his eyes holding hers. "Sometimes healing isn't about erasing the cracks. Sometimes it's about letting the light shine through them." Leah thought she was broken beyond repair. But God calls the broken beautiful. He restores. He redeems. And He reminds us that even shattered mirrors can still reflect His light. Leah unlocked her door, the cracked mirror still hanging on the wall inside. This time, when she looked at it, she didn't flinch. The crack was still there. But so was she. And for the first time, she saw something more than brokenness. She saw a story God wasn't finished writing. Leah's story reminds us that healing doesn't come from erasing the cracks. It comes from letting God's light shine through them. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more narrated tales of faith, love, and restoration. And share it with someone who needs the reminder. You are not defined by your reflection, but by the one who calls you His masterpiece.